Um, usually when we talk about like high-level success, there's this expectation of a perfectly correlated resume,
Oh, absolutely.
right? Like if you want the absolute best heart surgeon, you know exactly what to look for. You're searching for the Harvard medical degree, the decades of incredibly specialized training, the prestigious fellowships at places like Mayo Clinic.
Right. You look at their background, you look at their inputs, and it just makes sense.
Exactly. It's a linear equation. Good inputs equal good outputs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a meritocracy of specialized knowledge.
Yeah.
In almost every professional field, from structural engineering to neurosurgery, the person with the most rigorous technical training is going to outperform the amateur every single time.
But then you step into the world of personal finance, and suddenly that logic just, well, it shatters into a million pieces. We are looking at a landscape where the resume completely detaches from the reality of the outcome.
I'd go a step further, actually. It is the absolute definition of an unpredictable playing field. I mean, personal finance and investing might be the only major arenas in modern life where an entirely untrained amateur, like with no formal background whatsoever, can routinely crush the seasoned, highly educated professional.
And to really ground that for everyone listening, I want to start by throwing a completely baffling paradox your way.
Huh.
I want you to picture a woman named Grace.
Okay.
Now, Grace's life was not, it wasn't easy from the start. She was orphaned at 12 years old. She never married. She never drove a car. She lived her entire life in this very humble, basically sparsely furnished one-bedroom house.
Wow.
Yeah, and she worked her entire career as a secretary at a pharmaceutical company. She bought her clothes at rummage sales. She walked everywhere. And yet, when she passed away at age 100, she left an estate worth over $7 million USD.
That is just, I mean, that's a staggering sum of money, especially when you consider her peak earning years as a secretary in the mid-20th century.
Right, and she left almost all of it to charity. Okay, let's unpack this, because I want you to hold Grace in your mind for a second and look at the exact opposite end of the socioeconomic spectrum. Picture an executive named Richard.
The guy with the perfect resume.
Exactly. Richard had the resume we were just talking about. He was Harvard educated. He earned an MBA from one of the most prestigious programs in the
A
country.
check.
He ascended the corporate ladder to become an incredibly successful vice chairman at Merrill Lynch. He was making so much money and was so successful that he actually retired in his 40s to pursue philanthropy. Like he had won the game of finance.
Right. On paper, Richard is the guy you want managing your money. He's
Right.
literally the guy writing the textbooks.
He is. But here's the punchline, and it's a brutal one. The exact same year that Grace, the secretary, passed away and left a $7 million USD fortune to charity,
Yeah.
Richard, the Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive, stood before a judge and declared personal bankruptcy.
Oof. That's rough.
He was fighting off foreclosure on a sprawling 20,000 square foot mansion that he had heavily borrowed against. He literally told the judge that his only remaining liquidity, like his only cash, was whatever money his wife could get from selling off their antique furniture.
That's a whiplash-inducing contrast.
Yeah.
And the most crucial point for anyone trying to make sense of this is that there's absolutely no other field where these two stories can coexist.
None.
I mean, you will never, ever see a news story about a humble secretary who reads a few library books and suddenly performs a quadruple bypass surgery better than the chief of cardiology.
Right, or an amateur architect designing a skyscraper.
Exactly. It just doesn't happen.
So how does it happen in finance? I mean, that paradox is the engine for everything we're exploring today in this deep dive. We are going deep into the philosophy laid out by Morgan Housel in his book, The Psychology of Money.
Such a fantastic book.
It really is, because if you look closely at Grace and Richard, you start to realize that financial success is not about intelligence. It's not about mathematical skill. It is overwhelmingly about psychology and behavior.
And that requires a fundamental shift in how we view the subject itself. I mean, the underlying diagnostic error most of us make is that we treat finance as a hard science.
Like physics.
Exactly, like physics or chemistry, where strict rules and algorithms dictate the outcomes. If you plug in the right numbers, you get the right result. But finance is actually a soft skill.
Yeah.
It's not the study of money. It's the study of how people behave with money. And human behavior is, well, it's messy, it's driven by ego, fear, jealousy, pride. You can't capture that in a spreadsheet.
Which means this conversation is intensely relevant for literally everyone listening. It doesn't matter if you're a college student trying to scrape together your very first $1,000 emergency savings cushion, or if you're a seasoned executive managing a multi-million-dollar portfolio.
Right. The principles are the exact same.
Understanding your own relationship with money, your psychological triggers, your biases, your fears, is the ultimate shortcut to financial autonomy. You don't need a Wall Street pedigree, you just need to master your own mind.
And that mastery really starts with breaking down a very stubborn myth. We tend to think of being good with money as a single, unified skill set.
Like it's just one thing.
Yeah, exactly. But Morgan Housel makes a brilliant distinction. The skills you use to get your money are not the skills you use to keep it. In fact, those two skill sets are almost entirely at odds with each other.
Now, I want to push on that because on the surface, that sounds kind of counterintuitive. I mean, if I'm good at making money, shouldn't I naturally be good at having money?
You'd think so, right?
Hmm.
But let's break down the mechanics of getting wealthy. What does it actually take to acquire significant capital?
Risk, I assume.
Right. It requires extreme optimism. It
Mhm.
requires putting yourself out there, taking calculated and sometimes uncalculated chances. It requires swinging for the fences, starting a business, investing in unproven technologies. You need an almost irrational belief that the future is going to be wildly brighter than the past.
So you have to embrace risk.
You have to be totally comfortable staring at the possibility of failure and saying, well, I'm going to jump anyway.
I'm tracking with you. That's the whole entrepreneurial spirit. You have to basically believe you're the exception to the rule.
Precisely. But staying wealthy requires the exact opposite psychological posture. To preserve capital, you have to transition out of that aggressive optimism and adopt a mindset of profound humility.
Humility, not something you usually associate with Wall Street.
No, not at all. But you have to embrace frugality. And honestly, you need a very healthy dose of paranoia.
Paranoia.
Really? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to operate under the assumption that the world is constantly shifting, the economy is inherently unstable, and the wealth you've worked so hard to acquire can be taken away by forces completely outside of your control.
So let me get this straight. Getting wealthy is about trusting yourself, and staying wealthy is about distrusting the world.
That's a great way to frame it. The problem is the transition from that aggressive growth mode into defensive stability mode is incredibly rare.
Why is it so rare, though?
Well, what's fascinating here is that there's a biological, psychological reason for this. Success itself actually plays a terrible trick on the human brain.
Great. Success plays a trick. I would think success validates you.
It does validate you, and it's exactly the danger. The more successful you become, the more you start to believe that you are, frankly, invincible.
Oh, I see.
You start attributing all of your positive outcomes entirely to your own brilliant skill, your own hard work, your own flawless intuition. And in doing so, you completely ignore the massive roles that luck, timing, and hidden risks played in your success.
Ah, so you start thinking you're a genius rather than a smart person who also happened to catch a few lucky breaks.
Exactly. And this complacency, this deep-seated overconfidence, invariably leads to catastrophic risk-taking.
Like you start believing your own hype.
Yeah. Andy Grove, the legendary former CEO of Intel, he used to say, business success contains the seeds of its own destruction.
Wow, that's a heavy quote.
It is. The scrappiness, the hunger, and the caution that got you to the top slowly mutate into entitlement and complacency once you arrive there.
I see it. It's like a sports dynasty, you know? The hardest championship to win isn't the first one, it's the third one, because the team gets comfortable.
Yes, perfect analogy.
I like to think of this dichotomy like playing a basketball game. Getting wealthy is playing a hyper-aggressive offense. You're taking risky shots from half court, you're driving hard to the net, trying to rack up points as fast as possible.
Right.
But staying wealthy is a pure defensive game. Your only goal on defense is to protect the lead and just not get knocked out of the tournament. You're just guarding the perimeter, looking for vulnerabilities.
That analogy holds up so well, you really can't play offense while you're on defense.
But I have a problem with this.
Okay, what's that?
If you're telling me I have to be intensely paranoid and defensive to keep my money, does that mean optimists are fundamentally doomed? I mean, if I'm a naturally optimistic person who believes in the future, am I just going to inevitably lose everything because I can't play defense?
Not necessarily, but you are identifying the core friction there. You don't have to abandon optimism, but you do have to cultivate what Housel refers to as a barbelled personality.
A barbelled personality, meaning weights on both ends.
Exactly. You have to force your brain to hold two completely conflicting ideas at the exact same time without losing your mind.
Okay, that sounds exhausting.
It is. On one end of the barbell, you must be relentlessly, almost stubbornly optimistic about the long-term future. You have to believe that over the next 20, 30, or 40 years, human innovation will continue, the global economy will grow, and your investments will compound beautifully.
So that long-term optimism is what keeps you in the game.
Right.
And the other end of the barbell, the heavy part.
The other end is sheer paranoia about the short term. While you believe the year 2050 will be amazing, you have to be highly paranoid that the next 5 years could be absolute hell.
So expecting the worst, basically.
You have to assume there will be severe market crashes, sudden recessions, unpredictable personal emergencies, pandemics, geopolitical crises. The paranoia ensures that you build a financial structure sturdy enough to actually survive those short-term hurdles.
So you can stick around long enough to enjoy that long-term optimistic future.
Exactly.
The survival aspect, that makes a lot of sense. Because if you get wiped out in year 3, it doesn't matter how great year 30 is going to be.
That is the crux of it. Survival is the absolute prerequisite for everything else in finance.
Okay, well, let's actually lean into the mechanics of survival because this directly ties into the most misunderstood mathematical concept in human history, which is compounding.
Oh, compounding. People just don't get it.
They really don't. I want to throw a statistic at you that completely broke my brain when I first read Morgan Housel's breakdown of it. Let's talk about Warren Buffett.
The ultimate archetype of the wealthy investor.
Right. Ask anyone on the street who the greatest investor of all time is, and they'll say Warren Buffett. Now, a few years ago, when Housel was running these numbers, Buffett's net worth was roughly $84.5 billion USD. Everyone knows he's rich.
Of course.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Out of that $84.5 billion, a staggering $81.5 billion came after his 65th birthday.
I want listeners to really absorb that. He made over 96% of his total lifetime wealth after the age most people consider the finish line of their careers.
It's an absurdity. I mean, it feels like a typo. How does someone make $3 billion in their first 65 years of life and then $81 billion in their twilight years? It just doesn't make intuitive sense.
It doesn't make intuitive sense because the human brain is fundamentally not wired to understand it. We experience life linearly. We think linearly.
What do you mean?
Well, if you ask someone to calculate 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, their brain handles it effortlessly. It's 32. It's a straight line.
Right.
But if you ask that same person to calculate 8 times 8 times 8 times 8, the brain just stalls out. It short circuits. We cannot intuitively grasp the sheer violent power of exponential growth over long periods.
It's like the old penny doubling every day for a month trick.
Exactly. Would you rather have $1 million today or a single penny that doubles every day for 30 days?
Right. And most people intuitively grasp that the penny might be a trick, but they drastically underestimate by how much.
They might guess it turns into $100,000, but day 30 of a doubling penny is over $5 million. Day 31 is $10 million. The growth doesn't just get bigger, it accelerates at a pace that defies logic.
I heard a great analogy about this involving computer hard drives.
Oh, tell me.
Yeah, so if you look back at the 1950s, a cutting-edge IBM computer had a hard drive that held maybe 3.5 megabytes of data. It was literally the size of a refrigerator.
Right, massive.
Now, fast forward 40 years to the early 1990s. Personal computers are everywhere, and a standard hard drive holds maybe 500 megabytes. So it took 4 decades of intense technological innovation to gain about 500 megabytes of storage.
A respectable linear feeling progression.
Right. But then look at the next step. From 1990 to today, we didn't gain another 500 megabytes. We jumped from 500 megabytes to 60 terabyte drives. That is an increase of 60 million megabytes.
That's insane.
It took 40 years to get to 500, and then the exponential curve hit, and suddenly we're swimming in tens of millions of megabytes. Compounding doesn't just grow, it eventually explodes.
And that explosion is exactly what happened to Warren Buffett's net worth after age 65. If you deeply analyze Buffett's success, the grand takeaway is completely contrary to what financial media tells you.
Really? How so?
Well, the media focuses on his brilliant stock picks. They talk about how he analyzed Coca-Cola or American Express or how he understands moats and pricing power. And yes, he is incredibly skilled at those things.
But that's not his real secret.
No, his real secret is simple longevity. Buffett didn't start investing when he was 30. He started investing when he was 10 years old.
10, wow.
He has been continuously compounding his money for 3/4 of a century. And more importantly, he survived. He didn't burn out.
Right.
He didn't panic and liquidate his portfolio during the 14 different economic recessions he's lived through. He didn't leverage himself to the hilt and get wiped out in a crash. He just quietly, stubbornly survived.
So survival gave him longevity, and longevity gave the math of compounding the time it needed to work.
Exactly. It gave it time to work its absolute wonders.
I love this because the ultimate lesson from Buffett's story isn't that you and I need to become brilliant financial analysts. We don't need to spend 12 hours a day reading SEC filings trying to find the next Apple or Tesla.
Please don't.
Right. Good investing, the kind that builds generational wealth, isn't about making brilliant lightning strike decisions. It's simply about consistently not screwing up.
Let me push that even further. It is about being average for an above-average period of time.
Being average. Okay, that's not a very sexy pitch for a financial strategy.
It's not sexy, but it's bulletproof. Everyone in finance is chasing outsized returns. They want to beat the market by 20% this year.
Because that sounds impressive.
Sure, but chasing those outsized returns almost always involves taking on outsized risks. Risks that eventually blow up in your face. You do not need extraordinary returns to become extraordinarily wealthy. You just need good, solid, average market returns, sustained and uninterrupted for decades.
You know, Napoleon had a definition of a military genius that Morgan Housel loves to reference.
Oh, I know this one.
Napoleon said a military genius isn't the general who could execute a wildly complex tactical maneuver. A military genius is simply the person who can do the average thing when everyone else around them is going completely crazy.
That applies perfectly to your investments. Think about the spring of 2020. during the onset of the pandemic.
Oh man, that was terrifying.
The global economy essentially stopped. The stock market was in freefall, dropping thousands of points a day. Everyone around you is panicking. The news anchors look terrified. Your friends are pulling all their money out of the market and hiding it in cash.
Right, it felt like the world was ending.
In that moment, doing the average thing, which is literally doing nothing, holding your position, and trusting the long-term optimism of your barbell, feels Herculean. It feels like you're being negligent.
Yeah, you feel like an idiot just sitting there.
But that ability to sit on your hands while everyone else loses their minds is the defining characteristic of financial genius.
Okay, but let's be real. It is incredibly hard to sit on your hands and let your money quietly compound when the entire structure of our society is designed to make you spend it.
Oh, absolutely. The pressure is immense.
We have to talk about the psychological hurdle of societal status, because survival and compounding require capital, and you can't compound capital if you're constantly bleeding cash just to impress the people around you.
This is one of the deepest psychological traps we face. It's what Housel calls wealth is what you don't see.
Right. Let me set up the man in the car paradox for our listeners, because this completely changed how I look at luxury goods. Imagine you're walking down the street or you're stopped at a red light, and a stunning, brand new $250,000 USD Ferrari pulls up right next to you. The engine is purring, the paint is gleaming.
We've all had that moment. Your eyes are immediately drawn to it.
Exactly. But pay very close attention to what goes through your mind in that exact second. You never, ever look at the guy behind the wheel of that Ferrari and think, wow, the guy driving that car is so cool. I deeply respect him. I admire him as a human being.
No, the driver is almost invisible to you.
The driver is completely invisible. You look at the car and you think, wow, if I was driving that car, people would think I was so cool. People would respect me.
It is a hilarious, almost tragic paradox when you break it down. We buy massive houses, expensive watches, and flashy cars because we deeply desire respect and admiration from our peers.
We want them to validate our success.
Exactly. But those peers completely bypass admiring you. They don't care about you at all. They just use your shiny, expensive object as a mirror for their own desires. They use your car as a benchmark to imagine themselves being admired.
So the guy driving the Ferrari thinks he's buying a respect, but he's actually just buying a massive, expensive prop for other people's fantasies. He's paying $250,000 to be a background character in someone else's daydream.
And this draws a critical, foundational distinction that we have to clarify: the difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Right, because in everyday conversation, we use those words interchangeably.
We do, but psychologically and financially, they're entirely different states of being.
So define the difference for me. Because if I see someone in a Ferrari, my brain instantly says that person is wealthy.
And that is the exact illusion society relies on. Being rich simply means you have a high current income. You generate enough cash flow to afford the monthly lease payment on that Ferrari or the mortgage on a massive house in a gated community.
Okay, so rich is about income.
Yes, rich people are incredibly easy to spot because they go out of their way to make themselves known. They convert their cash into visible, tangible items, specifically so you can see how rich they are.
Okay, so rich is loud, rich is visible. What is wealthy?
Wealth is silent. Wealth is entirely invisible. Wealth is the $250,000 Ferrari not purchased. It's the diamond necklace not bought. It's the first-class upgrade declined.
Oh, I see.
Wealth consists of the financial assets, the index funds, the treasury bonds, the cash sitting in a high-yield savings account that have not yet been converted into stuff.
I love how Housel phrases it.
Yep.
He says, wealth is the gap between your ego and your income.
It's brilliant. If your ego demands that you show everyone exactly how much money you make, that gap closes to zero. You spend everything you earn to validate your status.
Right.
But if you can suppress your ego, if you can stop caring about whether the guy at the stoplight thinks you're cool, that gap widens. And that gap is where wealth accumulates.
If you think about it practically, spending money to show people how much money you have is literally the fastest way to have less money. I mean, if you walk into a dealership and buy a $100,000 USD car in cash, the absolute only thing I know for a fact about your financial situation is that you now have $100,000 USD less than you did an hour ago.
Exactly. Or, more likely, you are now $100,000 deeper in debt. You've actively destroyed your wealth to create the illusion of wealth.
Which links perfectly back to our earlier discussion about survival. If you are constantly converting all your cash into visible status symbols, you are hollowing out your financial foundation.
You are destroying your margin of error. True wealth, invisible wealth, gives you resilience. It gives you options.
Like the option to walk away from a bad situation.
Exactly. It gives you the flexibility to weather a brutal economic storm, or to quit a toxic job, or to handle a medical emergency without a panic attack.
Pursuing invisible wealth is what makes you invincible. Buying flashy things just to seek external validation only makes you impressive. And being impressive is usually temporary, whereas being invincible is permanent.
Exactly. I'd much rather be invincible than impressive.
Okay, so if the ultimate goal is to be invincible, to build this quiet, invisible, resilient wealth, how do we actually construct a financial plan that works in the real world? Because life is, well, it's chaotic.
It is very chaotic.
This brings us to a really counterintuitive concept. We often think of finance as cold, hard, rational math. But Housel argues that aiming to be reasonable is vastly superior to aiming to be rational.
This raises an important question, actually, and I'm so glad we're touching on this, because it challenges the entire wealth management industry. The industry operates under the assumption that human beings are rational actors who will always make the mathematically optimal choice.
Right, like we're all just walking calculators.
But we are not rational actors.
Yeah.
We are emotional, fearful, hormonal creatures.
Give me an example of the difference between rational and reasonable in this context.
Let's look at one of the most common financial debates. Mortgage debt.
Okay, everyone loves talking about their mortgage.
Right. So let's say you bought a house a few years ago and you locked in a ridiculously low interest rate on your mortgage, say 3%. Now you have some extra cash at the end of the month.
Nice problem to have.
For sure. So you sit down with a strictly rational financial advisor. That advisor will look at your spreadsheet, run the numbers, and give you very clear advice. They'll say, do not pay a single extra cent toward that mortgage.
Because of the low interest rate.
Exactly. They'll say, take your extra cash and invest it in a broad market index fund where you can historically expect an average return of 7% or 8%. You are borrowing money at 3% and earning 8%. You will mathematically make more money.
The math is flawless. The spread is 5%. It's a no-brainer.
On a spreadsheet, the math is entirely flawless.
Mm.
But, as we establish, you are not a spreadsheet. You are a human being subject to stress, uncertainty, and economic anxiety. Morgan Housel himself confesses in his book that he owns his house outright. Yes, he had a mortgage, he had the cash to invest, but he chose to pay off the house entirely. He openly acknowledges that it is the worst financial decision he has ever made on paper. He left money on the table.
But he also says it's the best money decision he's ever made in real life. Why?
Because it passes what he calls the sleep test. Having no mortgage, knowing that he owns the roof over his family's head free and clear, allows him to instantly sleep better at night. He doesn't have that massive fixed liability hanging over his neck.
So if everything goes wrong, he's still safe.
Exactly. If the economy completely collapses tomorrow, if his income drops to zero, the bank cannot come and take his house.
It's about psychological comfort.
Exactly. A mathematically rational plan is entirely useless if it causes you so much low-grade anxiety that you panic and abandon the strategy the moment things get tough.
Right. Let's play that out. Say you follow the rational advisor's advice. You keep the mortgage and invest the cash. Then a recession hits.
The stock market drops 35%.
Now your investments are bleeding out, your mortgage payment is still due every month, and rumors of layoffs are swirling at your job. The rational math hasn't changed. Over 30 years, you'll still likely come out ahead.
But the psychological pressure is immense. You panic. You sell your investments at the absolute bottom of the market just to get some cash to feel safe.
Because the market broke your programming. You tried to act like a robot, but under extreme stress, your humanity just took over.
Exactly. A reasonable plan, one that willfully sacrifices a few percentage points of optimal return in exchange for psychological comfort, security, and the ability to sleep soundly, is vastly superior.
Why? Just because you stick with it.
Yes, because a reasonable plan is a plan you can actually stick with for decades. And as we learned from Warren Buffett, sticking around uninterrupted is the whole game. Optimize for sleep, not for spreadsheets.
Optimize for sleep. I love that. Okay, I want to take everything we've talked about, the paranoia, the compounding, the leverage, the emotion, and look at what happens when these forces collide in the real world.
The case studies.
Exactly. History is the ultimate teacher of human behavior, and the stories in Housel's research are mind-blowing. I want to spend some time on the tragedy of Jesse Livermore.
A deeply fascinating and ultimately sobering case study. I mean, if you want to understand the danger of acquiring wealth without the skills to preserve it, there is no better example in history.
So Jesse Livermore was arguably the greatest stock market trader of his day. He operated in the early 20th century. Born in 1877, he literally ran away from home as a teenager, started trading in bucket shops, and built an absolute fortune through sheer intuition and mathematical brilliance. He was a savant.
Truly one of a kind.
Now picture the year 1929. The Roaring Twenties had pushed the stock market to dizzying, irrational heights. Everyone felt rich. But Livermore sensed the fragility. And when the historic stock market crash hit in October of 1929, the crash that kicked off the Great Depression, Livermore was positioned perfectly.
He wasn't just safe, he was actively betting against the market.
Right, he was shorting the market. Let's actually pause and explain what shorting means, because the mechanics of it really highlight the extreme risk he was taking. When you buy a stock normally, your risk is capped. If I buy a share for $100, the worst thing that can happen is the company goes bankrupt, the stock goes to zero, and I lose my $100. My potential loss is limited to what I put in.
Right.
But my potential upside is infinite. The stock could go to $1,000 or $10,000.
But short selling flips that entirely upside down.
Exactly. Explain that for us.
When you short a stock, you are borrowing shares from a broker that you don't actually own. You immediately sell those borrowed shares at the current high price, say $100. You put that $100 in your pocket. But eventually you have to buy the shares back to return them to the broker.
Right, you owe them the shares.
Yes, your hope is that the price drops. If the price drops to $20, you buy them back for $20, return them to the broker, and you pocket the $80 difference as profit.
It's betting on failure. But here's the terrifying part of shorting, which is the math of your risk. If I short a stock at $100, the most I can make is $100 if the company goes completely bankrupt. My upside is capped.
Yes, your upside has a strict limit.
But what if I'm wrong? What if the stock goes up? What if it goes to $500? I still have to buy those shares back to return them. I sold them for $100, but now I have to pay $500 to get them back. I've lost $400. What if it goes to $1,000? I've lost $900.
It keeps going.
When you short a stock, your potential losses are literally infinite.
It is the ultimate high-wire act without a net. And Jesse Livermore was doing this on an unprecedented, massive scale across the entire economy in 1929.
And he was right. The market collapsed. While the entire financial world was crumbling, while banks were failing and people were losing their life savings, some literally jumping out of windows, Livermore returned home one evening to his terrified wife.
She thought they were ruined like everyone else.
She did. But Livermore told her that in a single day, while the world burned, he had made the equivalent of $100 million USD.
He achieved the absolute pinnacle of wealth acquisition. He outsmarted the entire global economy.
He did. He won the game. But the aftermath, the transition from getting wealthy to staying wealthy, is where the story turns tragic.
Because that level of success, particularly when it occurs in the face of universal failure, destroyed him psychologically. Think about the swelled head concept we discussed earlier.
Right, his ego must have been massive.
Making $100 million in a single day when the rest of the world is ruined gives you a God complex. He completely lost his humility. He assumed his immense wealth was purely a product of his own infallible, untouchable genius.
He thought he was magic.
He completely discounted the role of luck, and more importantly, he forgot to respect the infinite risk of the game he was playing.
He couldn't flip the switch to defense. He had the money. He could have walked away, bought treasury bonds, and lived as one of the richest men on earth for the rest of his life.
But the ego wouldn't let him. He continued to take massive, highly leveraged bets in the market throughout the 1930s. He believed he couldn't lose.
But the market doesn't care who you are.
No, the market is indifferent to your past successes. Eventually, his bets turned against him. Because he was taking wild risks without any margin of safety, and because he was using immense amounts of debt to amplify those bets, he began to hemorrhage money.
It all unraveled.
Within a few short years, the man who conquered the Great Depression lost his entire historic fortune. He went completely, devastatingly bankrupt.
And he couldn't handle it. The psychological toll of reaching the peak of the mountain, feeling like a god, and then falling all the way back to the bottom was too much. In 1940, Jesse Livermore tragically took his own life in the cloakroom of a hotel in Manhattan.
It is the darkest, most profound illustration of our very first concept. The aggressive, risk-taking skills that allow you to acquire immense wealth will absolutely destroy you if you do not actively cultivate humility and paranoia to preserve it. The market gives and the market takes.
It's heavy. It really forces you to step back and examine your own ego. Now, I want to contrast Livermore's aggressive destruction with another story of failure from the same era of Warren Buffett, because this one is about patience.
This is a great contrast.
I want to ask everyone listening, you know Warren Buffett. You probably know his legendary business partner, Charlie Munger. But do you know the name of the third member of their investing trio?
Most people have absolutely no idea. They view Buffett and Munger as this unbreakable duo, but back in the 1970s, it was a trio.
Right. There was a man named Rick Guerin, and according to Morgan Housel's research, Buffett himself admitted that Rick Guerin was just as smart as he and Charlie were. He had the exact same intellect.
They made investments together, they interviewed managers together, they plotted out the future of their portfolios together.
So the obvious question is, what happened? Why are Buffett and Munger household names worth hundreds of billions of dollars, while Rick Guerin is virtually unknown to the public today?
It comes back to the barbell. Rick Guerin failed the test of survival. Buffett explained it perfectly in an interview years later.
What did he say?
Buffett said that he and Charlie Munger always knew they were going to become incredibly wealthy. They had a deep, unwavering optimism about their long-term strategy. But crucially, they were not in a hurry. They deeply understood the exponential math of compounding. They knew that if they just survived and let time do the heavy lifting, the wealth would arrive. Rick Guerin, on the other hand, lacked that psychological endurance. He was in a hurry. He wanted the exponential wealth immediately.
He couldn't wait 30 years for the compounding explosion. He wanted to force it.
Exactly. And how do you force compound? You use leverage. You borrow money.
Let's unpack leverage, because just like shorting, it's a financial weapon of mass destruction if handled poorly. When you invest with your own money, a market drop hurts, but it's just a number on a screen. If you have $100,000 invested and the market drops 50%, your portfolio is now worth $50,000.
Right. It sucks. You feel terrible, but you still own the shares.
Exactly. If you just wait 5 years for the market to recover, your portfolio goes back up to $100,000. You survived.
But leverage changes the physics of the game entirely. Leverage means you are investing with borrowed money. Let's say you have $50,000 of your own cash, and you borrow another $50,000 from your broker.
Okay, so you have more buying power.
You now have $100,000 invested. You are leveraged 2 to 1. If the market goes up 10%, you make $10,000. That's a 20% return on your actual cash.
Yeah.
It feels like magic. It accelerates your wealth.
But what happens when the market drops?
That's where the margin call comes in. The broker who lent you the $50,000 doesn't care about your long-term optimism. They only care about protecting their loan.
Right.
If the market drops 50%, that $100,000 portfolio is now worth $50,000. The broker looks at your account and realizes that if the market drops even 1 more percent, your portfolio won't have enough value to cover the $50,000 you owe them.
So what are there?
The broker issues a margin call. They demand that you instantly deposit more cash to secure the loan.
And if you don't have the cash?
If you don't have the cash, the broker takes control. They forcibly liquidate. They sell all of your shares right then and there at the absolute bottom of the market crash to pay back their loan. Your original $50,000 is completely wiped out. It's gone forever.
Oh, man.
Even if the market recovers the very next day, it doesn't matter. You have 0 shares. You are out of the game.
And that is exactly what happened to Rick Guerin. During the brutal bear market of 1973 and 1974, the stock market dropped almost 70% over a roughly 2-year period. It's agonizing.
It was a bloodbath.
Buffett and Munger watched their portfolios plummet, but they didn't have debt. They just gripped the steering wheel, survived the turbulence, and waited for the recovery. But Rick Guerin was highly leveraged. He had borrowed money to accelerate his wealth.
And when the market dropped 70%, the margin calls came. Rick was forced to sell his shares, including his shares of Berkshire Hathaway, which would eventually become one of the most valuable companies on earth to pennies on the dollar, just to pay off his debts.
He literally got wiped out. He had the exact same intelligence as Warren Buffett. He had the exact same information. But he lacked the patience and the paranoia to preserve his position. His impatience forced him out of the game.
It is a profound lesson. Leverage is the devil of preservation. It takes routine, inevitable market volatility, the standard ups and downs of the economy, and turns it into a potential for absolute, unrecoverable ruin. The golden rule of staying wealthy is that you must never put yourself in a position where a temporary dip in the market forces you to make a permanent, disastrous decision.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground here. We've explored the psychology of optimism versus paranoia, the mind-bending math of compounding, the invisible nature of true wealth, the vital importance of the sleep test over the spreadsheet, and the tragic historical realities of what happens when ego and impatience take the wheel.
It's a lot to process.
It is. So what does this all mean? I want to pivot and bring all of this directly into the listeners' lives right now. We are going to distill this philosophy into 3 actionable core Wealthnetic style principles. These are mindset shifts you can literally apply today.
I think the most profound place to start, takeaway number 1, is to fundamentally redefine how you measure wealth in your own life.
Okay, how so?
Society has trained us to measure wealth by material abundance. We look at the square footage of the house, the badge on the car, the brand of the watch, the luxury vacations posted on social media. But true financial freedom requires abandoning that metric entirely.
So what is the metric?
The highest dividend money pays. The greatest return on investment you can possibly achieve is not a luxury good. It is the autonomy to control your own time.
Stop measuring wealth by what you can buy and start measuring it by how much of your day you actually own.
Exactly. True wealth is waking up in the morning, looking at the ceiling and saying, I can do whatever I want today, with whomever I want, for as long as I want.
That is the ultimate luxury.
It really is. It's the ability to take a job you are deeply passionate about, even if it pays 20% less, because you have the financial cushion to absorb the pay cut. It's the ability to weather a sudden medical emergency without the compounding terror of wondering how you're going to pay rent.
It's the simple, profound power to look at an unreasonable boss or a demanding client and calmly say no.
Yes. The goal isn't to accumulate more things. The goal is to buy sovereignty over your own schedule. Time is the only non-renewable resource you have. Money is just a tool to buy it back.
Which leads directly into takeaway number 2. Save without a specific reason.
This is a big one.
Now, I know this one is going to challenge a lot of conventional financial advice. From the time we get our first allowance, we are taught to save for something. Save for a new bicycle, save for down payment on a house, save for a new car, save for a vacation to Hawaii. Every dollar has a specific, tangible assignment.
And if you're saving for tangible goals, that's fine. But Housel's philosophy argues that the absolute most important savings you will ever accumulate are the savings designated for absolutely nothing in particular. The unassigned money.
Why is unassigned money so critical?
Because the world is inherently violently unpredictable. You cannot forecast the macroeconomy, and you certainly cannot forecast your own life.
Job markets shift overnight with new technology.
Exactly. Personal health surprises us. Global pandemics shut down industries. If your entire financial plan involves saving only for a specific car or a specific house, you are completely unprepared for the surprises you literally cannot foresee.
You're saying we need to save against life's inevitable curveballs.
Yes, unassigned savings create what engineers call room for error. It is a hedge against the terrifying unknown.
Yeah.
Having a pile of money sitting in a bank account doing nothing but waiting doesn't mean it's wasted.
Right.
It means it is actively buying you flexibility. It gives you the power to pause, assess a crisis, and adapt your life on your own terms, rather than being forced into a desperate, panicked decision because you live paycheck to paycheck and your assigned savings are locked up in a car.
That flows perfectly into takeaway number 3. Build a margin of safety. This is how you operationalize the paranoia we talked about earlier.
Precisely. The most critical component of any comprehensive financial plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan. You have to assume things will break. You have to assume you will be wrong.
I love the engineering analogy for this. When a civil engineer designs a bridge and they calculate that the absolute maximum expected load of traffic is 5,000 pounds, they do not build the bridge to hold exactly 5,000 pounds.
Because if they did, one heavy delivery truck could collapse the whole structure.
Exactly. They build the bridge to hold 15,000 or 20,000 pounds. That massive gap between the expected stress and the breaking point is the margin of safety. It absorbs the unexpected shocks.
Translated to your personal finances, building a margin of safety means engineering your portfolio and your daily lifestyle so that you can survive a 20% or 30% drop in the stock market without it forcing you to alter your life.
So keeping that cash reserve.
Yes, your unassigned savings. It means fiercely protecting the gap between your ego and your income by living significantly below your means. But crucially, and this is perhaps the most difficult psychological challenge of all, it means learning when to stop moving the goalposts.
Oh man, the moving goalposts. That is the tragedy of modern ambition.
It really is. It is the hardest financial skill to master. If your expectations, your desire for luxury, status, and comfort rise equally with your financial results, there is absolutely no logic in striving for more.
Because you just spend it all.
If you double your income, but you immediately upgrade your house, your car, and your vacations to match that new income, you haven't actually gained any wealth. You've just increased your overhead. You will forever feel like you are on a treadmill, running faster and faster, but never actually moving forward. You will always feel like you don't have enough.
Because there is always someone richer. The ceiling of social comparison is infinitely high. If you make $1 million, you start hanging out with people who make 10 million. If you make 10 million, you start comparing yourself to billionaires. You can never win that game.
Exactly. The only way to win the game of social comparison is to flatly refuse to play it. You have to undergo deep introspection and define what enough looks like for you, personally, independently of what your neighbor is doing.
And once you reach that point of enough,
You build your margin of safety around it and you stop running. You step off the treadmill.
just accepting that you might have enough, that requires a profound level of self-awareness. But it is the ultimate freedom.
It is the only true financial freedom there is.
This has been an absolutely incredible journey. Let's briefly recap what we've unpacked today. We started by looking at a bizarre paradox, why a humble secretary can vastly outperform a Harvard-educated executive in the realm of finance.
The Grace and Richard story.
Exactly. We discovered that true financial success isn't about complex math. It's not about aggressive stock picking, and it is certainly not about flashy displays of wealth. It is about the quiet, patient, invisible discipline of compounding.
The barbell approach.
Right. It's about knowing the distinct psychological difference between the aggression required to get rich and the paranoid humility required to stay rich. And ultimately, it's about prioritizing your own resilience and autonomy over societal status.
It's about recognizing that reasonable consistency, the ability to pass the sleep test, will always, always beat rational extremity in the long run.
Beautifully summarized. Now, if this deep dive sparked an aha moment for you, if it made you rethink your own relationship with your portfolio or your career, we invite you to subscribe to the Wealthnetic channel.
Please do.
Share this discussion with a friend who might be caught up in the rat race, bringing themselves out on the treadmill, and desperately needs a perspective shift. And definitely highly recommend exploring Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money for yourself. The insights in there are literal game changers for how you view your life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, modern capitalism is an incredibly, almost terrifyingly efficient machine at generating two things simultaneously. First, it generates unprecedented wealth and innovation. But second, it generates insatiable envy.
Wow, yeah.
The system constantly, relentlessly bombards us with high-definition images of what we don't have. It profits off our feelings of inadequacy. So the lingering question I want to leave you with is this: as you wake up tomorrow and go to work, is your current exhausting pursuit of more actually stealing the one single asset you can never, ever earn back your time?
Just remember Grace, the humble secretary. She had no specialized training. She didn't have the prestigious resume. She didn't have the high status corner office. And she certainly didn't have the flashy Ferrari. But she had the quiet, invisible discipline of behavior. She understood what truly mattered. So the next time you picture what true financial success looks like, don't look for the prestige. Don't look for the impressive. Look for the invincible. Look for the peace of mind.